Woohoo! I'm Alyssa.
And I'm Maryann.
Welcome to Constitution Review 101.
First, we're going to start out by learning the amendments to the Constitution.
The first 10 are known as the Bill of Rights.
Number 1, freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly, and petition.
Second Amendment is the right to bear arms.
Third Amendment, you can't be forced to quarter soldiers.
Fourth Amendment, no unreasonable search and seizure.
Fifth Amendment, no self-incrimination or double jeopardy, aka the right to remain silent.
I plead the fifth. Sixth Amendment, a speedy and public trial. Okay, we can cut that.
Seventh Amendment, jury trials for lawsuits exceeding $20.
Eighth Amendment, no excessive fines or bails, which is no cruel or unusual punishment.
Ninth Amendment, there are laws beyond what is in the Constitution.
And 10th Amendment, powers are reserved to the states.
Now the other amendments, the 11th Amendment is that you can't sue a state that you don't reside in.
The 12th Amendment is the Electoral College chooses the president and the vice president at the same time.
13, 14, and 15 are called the Civil War Amendments. 13 is that slavery has been abolished.
14th, citizenship and equal protection to all people under law.
The 15th Amendment is that voting rights are extended to all men.
16th Amendment authorizes income tax.
17th is direct election of senators.
18th is prohibition enacted.
19th is women can vote.
Woohoo! 20th Amendment is presidential succession, lame duck, so they're put in office earlier.
21st is prohibition goes away.
Bye-bye. 22nd, terms are limited for presidents to 2.
23rd is that D.C. residents get to vote.
And 24th, there's no more poll taxes.
25th is the presidential succession or presidential disability, so like the assassination of a president, the transfer of power.
Okay, 26th Amendment is 18-year-olds can vote because they were able to be drafted, so now they should be able to vote.
And the last amendment, the 27th, is congressional pay raises.
Woo! Okay, next we're going to talk about how the Declaration of Independence came about. So first, the colonists in America felt like they were not being treated fairly by Britain because they were being taxed without representation. So they started to boycott the goods.
And then the Continental Congresses came about, and the first one was held in Philadelphia in 1774. In this Congress, there was little talk about independence, but instead they sent a petition to King George explaining their grievances about Britain.
Okay, and then in the Second Continental Congress, which was about a year later in 1775, fighting had already begun, so the first order of business was to create a federal army, and there was actually talk of independence in this one. George Washington was also named the commander-in-chief.
And then the Declaration of Independence happened, and it was adopted on July 2nd and passed on July 4th, 1776. And it stated that all men have natural rights, including life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Oh, and then this document was necessary in order to win the fight against Britain because it was like it showed the legitimacy of our new nation, and it enabled us to get things from other countries.
So after the Declaration, we needed a type of government to set up, so we set up the Articles of Confederation. And this was like trying to base a government opposite of British rule because it was such like a tyranny. So we created it due to fear of a powerful central government. And this one was like a voluntary association of independent states, so there wasn't much central power.
There were weaknesses, more weaknesses than strength of the articles. For example, Congress didn't have the right to tax. There was no national system of courts, and there was a national army, but the government had no power to draft soldiers.
And the few accomplishments it did have were the Northwest Ordinance, which abolished slavery in new states acquired through the Northwest Territories, and the new middle class was also developed where everyday citizens were more politically involved.
The thing that ended the Articles of Confederation was Shays' Rebellion, and it symbolized that the Articles could not maintain peace and order.
So now we needed a new kind of government.
Oh, come on!
So there were many different kind of plans for a new government, and so the first is the Virginia plan. It was favored by the large states like Virginia, and it was having a two-house legislature like we have today, but the lower chamber would be chosen by the people and the upper chamber would be chosen by the lower chamber. And the number of representatives was based on states' population.
Okay, the next plan was the New Jersey plan, and the small states wanted to be represented equally. So this plan stated that all representatives had the same number of representatives were from each state. And yes,
Yeah, nice. Okay, and then for the Great Compromise, this was people didn't know if slaves should be counted for the representatives, and so they came to a compromise that slaves would count as 3/5 of a person.
Also, the Great Compromise was the Connecticut's idea, and it created two houses where the House of Representatives was based on state population and the Senate was based on 2 senators per state.
So now we had 3 branches of the federal government, and we needed a way to make sure that one did not get too much power. We needed to whip them into shape.
There are checks and balances on each branch of the government to also ensure that one branch isn't too powerful. For example, Congress can enact laws, but the president can veto them. And also, the Supreme Court can declare laws unconstitutional, but the president chooses the Supreme Court judges.
Okay. There's some loopholes to these, though. So if the president vetoes the bill, the Congress can still overturn that veto with a 2/3 vote in both houses. Then Congress can also hold the power of the purse, which is funding, so they can refuse to fund something that the president puts into action or something like that.
So now the Constitution needed to be ratified by state legislators, and there was a battle between anti-federalists and federalists.
So the Federalists were in favor of the new Constitution and a strong central government.
And the anti-federalists wanted to prevent the Constitution from being ratified because they favored the status quo and they were afraid of change.
The Federalists had an advantage, though, because they were the ones that attended the Constitutional Convention and they had the background information that they needed. They also wrote the Federalist Papers, were a series of essays that appeared in the New York Times, and they were in defense of the Constitution and why it should be ratified.
They were also written by Alexander Hamilton.
I can't get this on. I don't know this one. Okay, so for the Bill of Rights, which were the first 10 amendments that we talked about earlier, were what convinced the Anti-Federalists to finally ratify the Constitution because they guaranteed individual liberties against the central government.
Hee-haw!
The nickname for the Bill of Rights is the Bill of Limits because it limited the power of the national government over the states.
There are 2 ways you can propose and ratify amendments.
For proposal, there can be a 2/3 members of both House and Senate to propose it, or at a convention called by 2/3 of the states.
And for ratification, it can be 3/4 of state legislators or 3/4 of ratifying conventions in the states.
Also, there are informal methods to amend the Constitution or to change the Constitution because the amendment process takes a long time. For example, congressional legislation, presidential actions, and judicial review. Thanks for watching, and good luck on the exam!